guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ksenia and I make videos for people who are going through the family immigration process. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to fill out the form I-864A. This form I-864A is to be used by household members who are combining their income with the petitioning or with the joint sponsor in order to be able to help those sponsors meet the income guidelines that are posted by USCIS. Read the form instructions for each and every USCIS form you are filling out. I will also link one of my videos that describes the difference between different types of co-sponsors. Not every relative of the petitioning sponsor or the joint sponsor can be a household member for the purposes of the affidavit of support. Just because you live with the sponsor doesn't mean that you are allowed to use the household member form. And also, if you are including household members who are filling out this form, you also want to make sure that you are filling out all the respective household member related questions in the sponsor's I-864 form. And I do recommend that you watch that video that I just posted for the regular affidavit of support before you watch this one, as that video is highly detailed and it will answer some additional questions that you may have for this form. We're going to start here. Part 1, provide the information about the household member, full name, and provide your mailing address. You only need to fill out in care of name if somebody else receives mail at this address on your behalf. If not, you can leave this line blank and proceed to the actual address. And then indicate if your mailing address is the same as your physical address. If it is yes, you can go ahead and skip the physical address part. But if you reside at a different address where you receive mail, if you click no, the form will then let you fill out the physical address portion. In our case, let's say we receive mail and live at the same address. Provide the household member's date of birth, country of birth, and social security number. For country of birth, while the petitioning sponsor or a joint sponsor should be a U.S. citizen, U.S. national, or a permanent resident, this requirement doesn't apply to household members. Next, provide the household member's A number if they have one, but our household member was born in the US, so we don't have an A number. And if they have a USCIS online account number, but most likely not, so we can leave it blank. Part 2, provide the household member's relationship to the sponsor. And the first two options are for the intending immigrants to use. So if you already watched the I-864 guide video, you know that intending immigrants can also use their income for the purpose of the affidavit of support to help the petitioning sponsor, but only in certain circumstances with authorized employment. And generally, intending immigrants, if they are using their income, do not have to complete this additional form. They only need to do it if they have accompanying dependents. And again, all of that was discussed in that other guide. But more often, household members will probably select one of these options. So let's say that our household member is not an intending immigrant, and we'll just say that our household member is the parent of the petitioning sponsor. Next, provide the household member's employment and income information. This section is very similar to the employment and income section of the I-864 form. So if you have any questions about this section that I don't cover in this video, I do recommend that you check out that other video as well to see if I answer your questions there. So first, provide what kind of employment you have and indicate the household member's individual annual income. So this is only for this specific person. If you are the kind of person who is a 1099 contractor, I would still select employed, and then I would provide the place that employs you. The only time I would select self-employed is if this household member owned a business or didn't have 1099s to show that they're contracted for a company. But in terms of self-employment and ownership of business, USCIS kind of makes it confusing and somewhat difficult to be approved as a sponsor or a household member. If you are self-employed, there's a lot of evidence that is required to that. So if you are able to a certain extent to indicate that you are an employee, then that would make it easier for USCIS and yourself in terms of evidence. Moving on to part 4, here you will need to provide the household member's federal income tax return information. And firstly, answer a question if you have filed taxes for each of the 3 most recent tax years. So it would be 2023, 2022, and 2021. Or if you have already filed your 2024 taxes, then that year becomes your most recent tax year. Answer if you filed for all 3, then yes. If you filed for only one of those years or 2 of those years, then answer no. Now, you only need to attach a photocopy for the most recent tax year. Next, provide the values that are located in the total income line in your tax returns. Let's say that we have already filed our 2024 taxes, so that would be our most recent tax year. Now, this is very important, and again, if you have any additional questions that I didn't cover in this video, check out the affidavit of support video. But you will need to type in the values from the total income line. As I always say, it is not adjusted gross income. It is total income from your tax transcripts or tax returns. You must provide at least the most recent tax year, exactly as it appears on that line. Unless, of course, you were not required to file tax returns for that year. You want to make sure that the income you're showing here and here both are able to add up to the sponsor's income to meet the income requirements. If you were not required to file a tax return for the most recent tax year, you have to write not applicable in this line. If your total income for that year was 0, then you would write 0. If the remaining 2 years you're either not planning to include or the income here was too low and it doesn't make sense for you to count it towards petitioner's requirements, then do not attach those returns, but also do not leave these lines blank and instead write not applicable, just like that. If you are the kind of household member that files taxes jointly with the sponsor, say you are the sponsor spouse, and the sponsor fills out the affidavit of support and they will write the tax return information exactly as it appears in their tax returns, but because you file those taxes jointly, then those amounts will basically be replicated in your form as well because you file your taxes as married jointly. And next, if you are the kind of household member that is planning to provide your assets, then you can indicate the value of those assets here. I went into more detail about assets in the I-864 guide, so you should be aware that any asset that you include will have to be backed by evidence of those assets. And in terms of savings, checking accounts, you will need to provide 12 months of bank statements to show that you have maintained those kinds of assets. And then if you are including your assets, whatever value you wrote here, you will also then respectively write it in the sponsor's affidavit of support in the assets section to add up. Same applies to the individual annual income. This amount should also be reflected in your section of the sponsor's affidavit of support in part 6. Parts 5 and 6 are the signature and certification of your agreement to sponsor the intending immigrants. But do not confuse these 2 parts because you were filling out this form as a household member. However, part 5 is the sponsor's promise. So the person who completed the form I-864. So provide the sponsor's name here and then type in the number of immigrants that you are sponsoring in this affidavit. So for the number of immigrants, you want to make sure that you are typing in the number of people that are listed in the sponsor's affidavit of support. And if the sponsor has to fill out separate affidavits of support, then you as a household member will then also have to fill out separate I-864A forms and attach one to each of the affidavits of support completed by the sponsor. If your sponsor is sponsoring multiple people on different affidavits of support, do not combine the numbers into one I-864A contract from different original affidavits of support. And unfortunately, there is a glitch with this form where it will not let you type in the number here. So instead, you can neatly write the number in pen after you print the form. But that is what you were supposed to put in the older version of the I-864A form. I hope that they fix this issue. So here, type in the name of the intending immigrant that was listed in the sponsor's affidavit of support. After you complete this section, select the appropriate statement, whether you can read and understand English or if the questions were interpreted for you. And then if somebody else prepared the form for you, then you can select this box and indicate the name here and provide the sponsor's contact information. If your mobile phone is the same as daytime phone, you can either repeat it here or leave this blank. And then the sponsor will have to sign this form. So again, this is the sponsor signing this form, the person who completed the I-864 affidavit of support. Moving on to part 6. Now this is the part that is signed by the household member. So the person who is filling out this specific form. And then print the number of immigrants you are sponsoring, again, in this section of the form. And this would be the same number that appears on the sponsor's affidavit of support. And again, unfortunately, the form will not let us type in the number, so we're just going to have to write it in pen after printing. Provide your statement and signature, and then provide your phone number and your email address. After that, you, the household member, will write out your name. You can also write it in pen after printing. This is what to print something means, is to actually write it using these kinds of printed letters in pen. I hope that makes sense. But it also allowed us to type this information up. And on the older version of the affidavit of support, you were also allowed to type up this part, and date of the signature can also be typed. But then the signature itself has to be made in a black pen after printing. Next, parts 7 and 8 are the interpreter/preparer information. If you did not use an interpreter or a preparer, you're welcome to just leave it blank. And finally, we are on the additional information page. You can use this page to clarify any information that you wish in your form. But ideally, you don't want to leave at least this top part blank. Write your name here as the household member after printing. And that's pretty much the entire form I-864A. Now let's talk about the evidence that is required for this form from you as a household member. We already discussed it in the form I-864 at the very end in the evidence section. I did mention, but let's review it again. The household member needs to, first of all, provide proof of their status in the United States, a proof of their relationship to the sponsor. That could be either your copy of marriage certificate, if you are the spouse of the sponsor. If you are a son or daughter of the sponsor who is at least 18 years old, you can provide a copy of your birth certificate. If you are a parent of the sponsor, you can provide the copy of the birth certificate of that sponsor, as long as your name is listed on there. And then if you are a sibling of the sponsor, then you will need to provide birth certificate from yourself and the sponsor, showing that you have the same mom and dad. Household members that are not the spouse of the sponsor must also provide proof of the same residence with the sponsor. Spouses, on the other hand, are not required to provide this kind of evidence, but you will not be penalized if you do provide proof of address with the sponsor, even if you are their spouse. After you provide proof of your relationship, you will then have to provide proof of your income tax returns that you filed for at least the most recent tax year, as we discussed here. Unless you were not required to file tax returns, then you would need to attach some kind of explanation showing why you were not required to file. If you are the household member that files taxes jointly with the actual sponsor, then you do not have to repeat the tax returns again, as they have already been attached to the sponsor's affidavit of support. But if you're the kind of household member that files taxes jointly with your spouse, but you're not the sponsor's spouse, then in addition to your tax returns, you will also need to provide your W-2s or 1099s showing which portion of that tax return income is actually yours. Additional evidence that is optional but recommended is for the proof of your current individual income, which could be in the form of the pay stubs from the past 6 months and or an employment verification letter from your employer. And then if you included assets, we talked earlier about the kind of information you will need to provide for that. It is also listed out in the form instructions. If you are the kind of household member who is self-employed or retired, in that case, there may be additional evidence that you need to provide. I will definitely include a couple of links under this video that are very useful. So that is the kind of evidence you will need to provide as a household member. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up so more people can see it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. That would be super helpful. I hope to see you guys in my next videos. Bye!